are talking about extending D365 F&O solutions with the use of Power Platform. So we just have our Mint motto there. So if I move to this slide, so just a little bit about myself. So I'm the solution architect and lead ERP consultant here in Mint UK. Been implementing Microsoft solutions now, business applications for just over a decade. And that has been across D365 F&O more recently, but originally AX. So I have a number of implementations across the manufacturing industries, food service, and also managed and professional services. And my experience is both on a partner side and end user side. So a number of implementations, both sides. Now, one of the key things that I want to highlight from my experience is I have a functional background within Microsoft implementations. So as a lead ERP consultant and solution architect, I have a functional background and not a technical background. And that's something quite important to pick out for today's presentation. As you know, I'm not a traditional developer. I've not done traditional coding, but this just goes to show the Power Platform and how powerful it can be, and to show that functional users and functional consultants and functional leads can use the Power Platform to create pretty powerful solutions in a short period of time. So just bear that in mind as we go through the webinar today. Okay, so agenda. So what we're going to do today. So firstly, we'll do an overview of Power Platform. Now, during this overview of Power Platform, I won't spend too long, as Power Platform has been around for a number of years now. So I'll make the assumption that those of us on the webinar have heard elements of Power Platform before, have maybe seen some of its use cases. And I've also noticed on the registration list, we have a number of Power Platform developers joining us today. So we have a varying range of knowledge with us on the call today. What we'll then do is we'll discuss the business case for the demonstration in today's webinar. So the business case will be a supplier onboarding process. And what I'll do is I'll take us through the scenario, through the business case, and talk about how we're going to use Power Platform to digitalize that business process. We'll then move swiftly into the demonstration and the creation of a Power Platform solution. And again, I'll cover some of the elements that we're going to build as part of the Power Platform solution today. And then finally, once we've built the demonstration and we've done a run through and we've done a demo, we'll do a quick recap and then we'll take any questions. Now, what I will say is if at any point during the presentation you have any questions or any points of concern, just please feel free to put those in the chat, and myself and Claire will monitor those to see if we can take some of those questions during the webinar or if they make more sense to handle towards the end of the session. Okay, perfect. I can see we've got people joining slowly on the session. Okay, so as I said, I'll do a very brief overview of the Power Platform, what it is. Now, what I will say with this, there's a lot of information on the slides. I will try and go through this quickly, just as I believe many of the people on the call would have had an initial overview of Power Platform, what it is and where it sits. But if there are any particular questions or you want me to focus on a particular slide or a particular topic in a little bit more detail, just please put that in the chat and Claire will monitor that and she'll give me a heads up to spend a little bit more time on a particular area if required. Okay, perfect. So just a quick overview of the Power Platform. What is the Power Platform? So Power Platform is Microsoft's answer to low code and no code business solutions and developments. So within the stack, within the Microsoft Power Platform, there are a number of elements. So one of the original parts of the stack was Power BI. This is a low code, no code approach to business analytics and reporting. We have Power Apps, which is used for the development of applications. We have Power Automate for process automation and business process workflows, and also for smaller scales integrations. And I'll come back onto that point shortly. We also have Power Virtual Agents, which is low code, no code chatbots. There are other elements to the stack which are slowly being introduced. We have Power Pages, Power Portals, but mostly they fit within one of these elements here on the screen. And as you can see, that all sits on top of Dataverse, which is the low-code, no-code approach to database structures and tables. We do have elements of AI and data, other data connectors out of the box there in the Microsoft Power Platform. And in today's demonstration, we will be focusing on three particular elements. So we'll focus on Dataverse, we'll focus on Power Apps, and we'll focus on Power Automate for our solution today. So just a little snip of a Gartner chart there. And as you can see, in this area of low code, no code development and design, you can see that Microsoft comes in the top right quadrant on the Gartner report. So it's competing at the top level in this space. Okay. So firstly, the first element we're going to look at today is going to be Dataverse. So as I said, this is the low code, no code approach to creating database tables and structures. Now, for those of you that have been around the Power Platform space for a little bit longer, this has changed name many times. So originally, we had names such as Common Data Model, Common Data Service, has been rebranded now as Dataverse. But essentially, it provides some standard tables out of the box that could cover a wide range of scenarios. And you can then also create custom tables based on your business requirements and needs. And again, I am going through these elements very quickly. If there are any particular areas you want to focus on a little bit more, please get your comments in the chat. So next element that we're going to be focusing on today is Power Apps. So this is the low code, no code solution for creating business applications. And in there, essentially, we have two key types of applications. We have model-driven applications, which are quick and easy to build applications that are data-driven. So there's a fairly standard layout for model-driven apps. And if any of you have used CE applications such as D365 Sales or Field Service or Project Operations, they are built on the model-driven app platform. So what you'll see today, we are going to use a model-driven app for our solution. So it should be a very familiar user interface for those of you that have used CE applications previously. We also have Canvas apps, which is more of a what you see is what you get designer. So you start with a blank canvas and you can design your own user interface in whichever way suits your business needs. So yeah, let's move on. Next element we're going to focus on today is Power Automate. So this is the solution for business automation, business process flows, and elements of integration. So you can quickly and easily build business logic to automate manual and repetitive tasks. Now, what I will say is with this particular area, we are going to use Power Automate today to integrate between the Power Platform and Dynamics 365 F&O as an ERP system. Just be wary with the use around Power Platform for integrations. So where we have low volumes and more simple integrations, we can use Power Automate to power that integration. For larger scale integrations, you may need to go down the Logic Apps route or traditional integration methods. But essentially, for each solution or each business requirement, we still recommend a technical architect to review the integration stage to decide on the best approach for integration. But in the case of our business scenario today, we are going to use Power Automate for the integration. And just on that point about do's and don'ts, we do have an up and coming webinar over the next couple of months with one of our Power Platform leads who will describe the do's and don'ts of Power Platform solutions. So we just have a quick overview here, and some of these might be slightly outdated, but we have a quick overview of the Microsoft ecosystem. So we have a whole load of business applications. We have finance and operations, which is our core ERP system. We have surrounding or supporting CE applications. So some of you may have already been on sales or customer service platforms. We have field service, we have project operations. So the number of applications in the suite for D365 business apps. And that's surrounded by a whole load of other Microsoft technology. So we have productivity tools, we have Azure and data analytics. And then as you can see here as well, we also have this overlay of Power Platform. So, so just talk about current landscape. So when we talk about full stack implementations, we now have much bigger solutions compared to historical implementations. So if I think back to AX 2012 implementations, the art of the possible was a lot smaller than what we have today. So in today's world, in the Microsoft business application space, when we talk about designing a solution for a business, we tend to have, for enterprise scale solutions, we tend to have the core ERP system being D365 F&O that is supported with CE applications for further functionality around sales and field service and project management. So we can now cover a much wider range of business scenarios using the standard out of the box Microsoft technology stack. And that's really where the Power Platform comes in. So traditionally, if we did not have the capability to carry out a business function within the ERP system or within one of the CE applications, we would go down the traditional development route. So that would require some analysis with the customer. The functional team and the consultancy would design specifications on how the application can be developed using custom code. And then that would be developed in the traditional development route by a development team, and the custom code would be deployed to the ERP system. So now with the introduction of Evergreen and continuous improvement and upgrades from Microsoft in the D365 F&O platform, we tend to steer away from developments where possible. Now, this is where Power Platform becomes really useful, because if we're trying to go for an approach that requires less development and less coding in our solutions, then we can now use Power Platform to enhance our solutions and cover a wider range of business scenarios than would be possible out of the box in any of the given applications. There's now much more convergence between the two platforms through the use of dual write, but we won't touch on that today. That may come in following webinars in this series. So yeah, I think I've already spoke about there. There is a big push from Microsoft now to reduce the reliance on development and coding where possible. Not always possible given various industries, but where we can, we try to steer away from traditional development and look at what is in the Microsoft stack as standard. And that's where Power Platform becomes really, really powerful. And we'll see that in today's demonstration. So just quickly, the benefits of Power Platform. So reduced development and implementation time, much quicker time to value. This is a key one. So there's a greater convergence between the two Microsoft architectures and a greater collaboration between traditional dev teams and functional teams. So where there was a heavy reliance on the dev team and dev resources and the resource constraints there, what we now can do using Power Platform is put some of that work in the hands of the functional teams. So functional users can pick this up. They can start to create proof of concepts. They can start to create test apps that will focus on their particular business requirements. Now, with that, there is much greater flexibility, but we do recommend having a center of excellence set up so that if functional users or citizen developers are developing solutions, that goes through a central point in the business so that it's governed correctly and deployed correctly to the business. And again, I won't touch too much on that today. Andrew will be picking that up in his do's and don'ts of Power Platform in a following webinar. Okay, so just some use cases and how I've used this in previous industries and previous customers. So a couple of quick use cases here. We have in the food industry, it's common to do daily vehicle inspection checks. So if you have a delivery from a supplier and you're in the food industry, it's very common that you have to do certain checks on the vehicle to make sure there aren't any contaminants and the temperature of the vehicle is set to the correct temperature. So those of you that have used D365 F&O or AX will be aware that quality orders are only available for stocked items and for item codes, and not on non-stock items or concepts such as a vehicle, or anything not related to do with the stock that is being delivered. So to handle this scenario, we've previously implemented Power Apps with our customers where you can go through a various number of checks. You can scan barcodes on the Power App. You can take pictures of the vehicle and you can attach those into the quality checks on the application. Some very cool stuff we've done around vehicle inspection checks there. We've also done site induction checklists, asset management site checklist to pre-startup checks for production. So there's some very, very cool use cases here in the Power Platform. So just a number of use cases there listed. And last point on the slide deck here is the supplier onboarding solution. So again, those of you that have used F&O or used AX will be aware that the supplier process in the ERP system starts at the point of creating the supplier once it's been approved and we are going to trade with that supplier. So traditionally, there is a much greater process before creating the supplier in the ERP system. So there's the onboarding of the supplier, the collection of data, and when they are a prospective supplier and we're not sure if we're going to trade with them yet, there is essentially a workflow process or an approval process that has to take place off system before the business agrees that we are going to trade with the supplier and we can set them up as a live record in our ERP system. So this is the scenario that we are going to look at today. I have a slide on Center of Excellence here, which we touched on earlier, but I won't spend too much time on that. So let's get into the business scenario. Claire, do we have any questions from the presentation so far?
Not at yet, Amar, so you can get right in.
Perfect. Okay. So let's look at today's business scenario. So business scenario is in the current world, in our business with our customer, the current process is using a spreadsheet to capture data for new or prospective suppliers during the onboarding process. So we don't have a structured system as such, but we are using spreadsheets to capture data before we go ahead and create this supplier as an approved supplier in our ERP system or the finance systems. So as part of this onboarding process, the procurement team will enter and collect some data. So they'll have some discussions with the supplier. They'll capture information such as contact information, address information, some high-level information about that supplier's business. And once they've entered their data, they would then notify the finance team to then speak to the finance department with the supplier, agree some financial information, and collect that back into our spreadsheet. The finance team will then obviously populate that information into the spreadsheet, and at this stage they then pass over to the QA team, who will carry out some regulatory checks and populate some relevant quality information where required. So as part of the onboarding process, the QA team are doing a number of checks on that supplier to vet them and to ensure that they are suitable to trade with for our business. And again, this is all just captured on the spreadsheet to say we've carried out this particular check, we've carried out this particular check, they've either passed this, they've failed this check, or capturing any certification information, all done within the spreadsheet currently. So once the procurement team are happy that all of the data has been captured and all of the relevant checks have been completed, they will then take this Excel spreadsheet, attach it to an email, and email that to the finance and the procurement managers for them to approve the supplier record, and basically receive an email back to say, we are happy that we can trade with this supplier. Please go ahead and set them up on the ERP system. So at this stage, even though we've captured a whole load of information on an Excel spreadsheet and we've got a whole load of data collected on this supplier, after we receive manual approval via an email, it would then be up to the master data team or a procurement lead or a finance lead to then manually go and key that data back into the ERP system and create a new supplier record. So as you can see here, this is a very manual process. It's very off system on Excel spreadsheets. There's no structured process in our ERP system to handle this process. So this is a very, very good use case and a very good scenario of where Power Platform can come in and enhance, digitalize, and automate this process. So this is the process that we're going to take today. And what we are going to do, given these set of business requirements and this business scenario, we are going to use the Power Platform to create a solution to automate and digitalize this process. Okay, so I'm just going to come out of my Power Platform, my presentation there. And very quickly, I'm just going to give us a quick overview of our spreadsheet. So it's a very simple spreadsheet that we've got here. Now, what I've tried to do is keep it as simple as possible for today's scenario. In reality, this spreadsheet will be many columns wide and there'll be many rows of data. But as you can see, I've just tried to keep it fairly simple for today's demonstration. So on the spreadsheet, we capture initial supplier information such as a supplier code, and that's something that we control internally with a manual number sequence. We capture the supplier name, some of their address information, some of their contact information. We also have a manual approval status here in the spreadsheet. So as and when we get an email from the finance department or from the procurement manager to say we're happy to trade with the supplier, we will come back into the spreadsheet and update this column manually to approved. We also capture some financial information. So what are the preferred payment terms for this supplier? And as you can see here, we have a number of regulatory checks and QA checks, checks carried out by the QA department around anti-money laundering, modern day slavery, and just checking if it's in the food industry, for example, do they have the applicable certificates for us to trade with them. So as you can see, all of these fields, there's not much logic going on here in the spreadsheet. All of this information is manually keyed in. So what we want to do is greatly enhance this business process now by using the Power Platform to extend our D365 F&O implementation. So let's look at what that looks like. So I've just gone onto Power Apps homepage here. So we've got make.powerapps.com. If you load into that, it will take you to your Power Apps homepage. And as you can see here, I've got my own custom environment. Now down here, we have the various elements which we touched on in the presentation. So we have tables, which is the Dataverse, we have flows, which is Power Automate, and we have applications, which is Power Apps. And we are currently sitting in the Power Apps part of this platform. So let's get started. So where do we start? So we always recommend you start with creating a solution. Now, a solution houses all of your elements together. So rather than going to create a freestanding table or a freestanding flow, we will start with a solution and house all of our elements within that solution. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a new solution. So I'm going to call it supplier onboarding solution. I'm going to select a publisher here, and then I'm going to create. So one of the key things which I will say at this stage is, if you can imagine we're taking this business scenario and we were doing a traditional development route, whereby we had to go and create a database structure or a SQL table, and then build a user interface over the top of that structure so that the business can carry out their process, create an automation for an approval workflow, and then also create an integration to an ERP system. As you can imagine, traditional development route, that would take a significant amount of time. You know, we're talking days to weeks, even to produce a proof of concept. And what we are going to show today, hopefully within the space of half an hour, we can actually create a proof of concept solution that we can start to test this functionality in the Power Platform. So you'll see here, I've created my supplier onboarding solution. Now, what I can do from here is I can start to build new elements directly within this solution. So what I'm firstly going to do is I'm going to create a freestanding element, and I'm going to bring that into my solution just to show you how that works. And then everything from there, we will build directly in the solution. So I'm going to go ahead and create myself a table. So I don't have a table at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and create a table. Now, what I could do is I could create this table from scratch. So I would start with a blank table. I would specify what my columns are, what my fields are, apply some logic into those and specify what type of field or column it is. And then I would have to import my data. But in the Power Platform, we now have a very cool tool, which is upload from Excel file. So I already have an Excel file, which I'm using in the business today. Now, if you relate this to your business, there'll be a number of processes that you're handling off system via Excel spreadsheets. And I'm just going to show how easy it is to take an existing spreadsheet and upload that to create a database structure within the Power Platform. So let's go ahead and click upload on Excel file. And I'm just going to select from my device where you'll see I've got my supplier onboarding application. So I'm going to select that and bring it in. What that's doing now, and you can see this is in preview still, but what that's doing is going through the Excel spreadsheet, it's extrapolating the data, and one of the nice features about this now is there's this Copilot integration. So for those of you that know a little bit about Copilot, it's Microsoft's AI technology, and they layer that into the various different elements of the stack. So Copilot has been through my Excel spreadsheet, and what it's essentially done is taken all of the fields out of the spreadsheet and identified what the column headers should be for our database and table structure. It's also been through that and it's identified what this table is actually representing. So through the use of Copilot and AI, it's recognized that we've got some supplier information in this Excel spreadsheet. So it's automatically titled my table as supplier information. So I'm just going to actually change that, and I'm going to call it, let's call it prospective suppliers. Okay. And my primary column is still my supplier code. So let's go ahead and save that. And as you can see here, it's been through the rest of the Excel spreadsheet. It's given us our field names, and also very nicely, it's also imported the data within the spreadsheet. So you can see I've actually got my existing rows from that spreadsheet. I just want to show you a couple of things which are really cool. So if we go and look at contact number and I click edit column, it has recognized that this, from our Excel spreadsheet, it's recognized that this is actually a phone number. So it's formatted this column automatically to be a phone number type field. If we look at our email address, you'll also notice that even though this is a text field, it's recognized that the format is an email address. And that's quite key because out of the box, you do get some very simple validations on whether this is a correct format for an email address that is being entered within this field for a new record. So the fact that the AI has been through and recognized this as an email address column and automatically formatted it as an email address is very cool. So it's been through and it's basically said, okay, these are my fields. And as you can see here with my anti-money laundering checks, it's recognized this as the choice table. But what we've said is in our Excel spreadsheet, we only have a value of pass. So we can create global choices at this stage and we can, link it up with an existing choice. But all I'm going to do for today's demonstration is I'm going to go in and manually add an extra choice. So we either have a pass or a fail. What we can also do is say when we create a new record, what is the default choice? Does it default to fail? Does it default to pass? Now, it's very common that for quality checks and regulatory checks, we default to failed, so the negative. So it relies on somebody applying the positive value against that check. But for today's demonstration, we're just going to leave it as none. And we're saying selecting multiple choices is not allowed, so you have to select either pass or fail. Now, what I can do is I can make some of these fields required, but for today's demonstration, we're not going to make any of these fields as required fields. So I'm also just going to go in and do the modern day slavery check and also going to add a fail choice in there too. Okay, so I'm happy now with my database structure. I'm happy with what Copilot has suggested there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create this table. That's going ahead now, and it's provisioning the table, it's creating all the fields, it's bringing the information in, and it's going to go ahead and create that table that we can then bring into our solution. So just whilst that's doing this thing, it should only be around 30 seconds to a minute. But whilst that's doing this thing, Claire, have we got any questions in the chat so far?
Hi, Amar. Yes, someone had asked if you need a Copilot license to execute any of this functionality.
At the moment, no. So this is the Copilot functionality that you see there. This is in preview, so this could change. But the Copilot functionality that we see there was embedded within my existing Power Platform license and the functions that I had available to me in that license.
Awesome, thanks.
Perfect. So you can see here now that that has gone away. It's created my table. So we've got some columns. We've got some data already within there. And what you can see from here is I can go and create forms. I can go and create views. I can go and create some business rules to update fields. But on the whole, I'm fairly happy with my table structure. It's a simple scenario we're doing for today, so I'm fairly happy with my table structure. So now what I want to do is I've created my backend table, but I want to now create a user interface. And again, if we think about creating a user interface from scratch, this would take many days and weeks even to get to the point of a proof of concept. So within the click of a button, what we can do, so firstly, what I'll do is let's go back to our solution, so our demo supplier onboarding solution, and let's bring in our freestanding table into our solution, and we'll now work within our solution. So add existing table. I'm just going to search for the table that I've just created outside of my solution. I'm going to select that and I'm going to press next, and I'm going to bring that into my solution. Okay, sorry.
Amar, there's another question, if you have a moment. So Raisa has asked a three-part question.
Sure.
When will the upcoming Power Platform session be? So Raisa, that will be posted at the end of this week. I could answer that one.
Sure.
Then Raisa's also asked, where can we create apps for practice? And has Power Apps been implemented in labs, pharmaceutical, medical industries?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So firstly, where can we, sorry, I've just gone and brought my table into my correct solution. I put it in the wrong solution first. So the first question on where can we create test applications. So you can actually sign up for a development environment, and that's a free to use development practice environment. And this is actually an example of that. I've created my own development environment. So I'm not particularly signed up with a paid license here. You do have the access to trial environments and development environments where you can go ahead and create practice solutions. Has this been, so the second question was, has this been implemented in the pharmaceutical industry? Was it Claire?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so yes, it has. And again, each business scenario is, needs to be reviewed, and the best solution. So you would work with a solution architect and a technical architect to decide the best route for a particular business requirement. But essentially, there have been a number of Power Platform solutions that have been created within the pharmaceutical industry. And we actually have a number of customers who we're talking to now about potential applications for them in the pharmaceutical industry. Now, what I would say is it very much depends on the business requirement and the regulatory requirements that the business stipulates. So what you'll see today is we're doing an approval workflow just using email and Teams. Some businesses may stipulate that that is not enough for them from a auditing perspective, and they prefer to use DocuSign as an example. Power Platform does actually have a connector to DocuSign, so there is some pretty cool solutions you can develop using DocuSign in Power Platform. But as a short answer, yes, there have been examples of solutions implemented in the pharmaceutical industry. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to take my prospective suppliers. So I've gone into my table, and as I said, I'm just going to create an application over the top of this. So I'm not going to create an application from scratch. I'm going to go to my table and I'm going to click the create an app button. Well, I'm going to create this as supplier onboarding application, and we'll go ahead and create that. What that's doing now is it's taking my existing table structure and it's building a user interface over the top of my existing table structure. So I'm not having to do anything by going to create a application from blank and bring in all my elements, create my views, create my forms. This tool does everything for you. So it takes your table and it's now created a user interface over the top of that. So if we look at what we've got in here, we have a group here where it's brought in my tables, it's brought in an initial view and initial forms, and it's very quickly created a user interface. So we are just going to make a couple of small amendments to this today. So I'm just going to call my group supplier management. And then I'm also going to call my sub area. Just give that a second to load. My system must be running a little bit slow today. Okay, I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's go ahead and amend our form first. So let's save and continue. So we're going to save the changes that we currently have in here, and we're going to go ahead and amend our form. So what you'll see here, this is amending a form. So where we create a new prospective supplier record within the Power App, this is the default form that has been created for us. So we haven't had to do any of this. The tools out of the box have recognized that we have a table structure and that most of our custom fields we will probably want to work with in our form when we create a new prospective supplier record. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to make some small amendments to this form now and tidy things up. So those of you that have worked with finance and operations will know when you go on a supplier record, you have multiple tabs of data just to keep things clean and keep things segregated. So we're just going to go ahead and do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a new column, a new tab. So I'm going to name that tab financial information. And then I'm going to go ahead and add another tab called quality information. So the purpose of this is I don't want all of my information, all of my fields being on this first general tab. So what we're going to do is we're going to take out payment terms. I'm just going to delete from this section. We're going to take out our regulatory checks and quality checks. So we'll delete those from this initial tab and we'll go into the financial information form, and it's very simple. I can go into this financial information form, I can click on my payment terms field and it brings it into my form. Same with the quality information, I can go ahead, press anti-money laundering checks, modern day slavery checks and food certificate. And you'll see there very quickly, we've managed to change the flow and the layout of our form. So let's go ahead and save and publish that. Oh, this will just take 15, 20, 30 seconds. But whilst that's sort of saving and publishing, essentially it's just updating the latest version of this form so you can see that's saved and published. So if I go back now and I go back into my application, what you'll see here is it's brought in the latest view. So it's updated my view based on the standard fields that it thought. But also now behind this, if we were to create a new record, we would have the form based on what we've just created. So let's just go and have a look at that. So within the space of a few minutes there, I now have a user interface with some views, with some forms, and the ability to capture new data. One of the very cool things about model-driven app is a lot of the UI work is done for you. And as you can see here, it's actually out of the box. When it creates this application, it creates very different versions of the application. So for phone, for tablet, for desktop, and also an automatic responsive design solution as well. So we're just going to go ahead and save this. We're going to publish the application to see what that looks like. and we are going to go ahead and play that application. Okay, so here now, if I go into my existing records, you'll see here it is actually brought in my existing information, and I can view that in my current form structure. And if I wanted to, I could go ahead and I could create a new supplier record. So if I was to go and create a new supplier record, let's just create a test one for now. So I'm not going to put too much information in, but you'll see at this stage, it's just a case of going in ahead and keying this information in. So there's not much going on in this form apart from me being able to capture the details. So I'm actually going to back out of this, because what we're going to do is we're going to create a business process flow. So we're going to go and create a Power Automate flow to do some approvals and create an integration into F&O. And what we're also going to do is create a business process flow, which will basically create a process guide to take somebody through the steps in this process. And that's pretty cool when we see what that does for us. So let's back out of this. We're going to discard the changes. We're not going to save this. We're going to go ahead and now do some more things with our solution. So let's go back now and let's do some new elements of our solution. So if I go into back into my supplier onboarding solution, we can see here all of the elements that we've got currently. So we've got our sitemap, our model driven app, and we've got our table. So what we're going to firstly do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new automation. So we're going to take a Cloudflow and we're going to say we've got some options. We've either got automated, we've got instant, or we've got scheduled. So in this case, we're just going to go for the instant Cloudflow. And what that means is I will manually trigger the flow myself. Okay, so it's not based on any automated step, but when a flow step is run from a business process flow. So as part of our business process flow that guides us through the process, we'll design a workflow that says procurement needs to capture information, quality needs to capture information, finance needs to capture information. Once all that information has been collected, somebody then needs to submit this record for approval. So we're going to start our automation with us saying we will manually run our business process flow and approval. So let's create our automate solution. So first row, when a flow step is run from a business process flow, and I'm going to go through this very quickly because I know we're very short on time today. I'm going to go through this very quickly. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Microsoft Dataverse and I'm going to get a row by ID. So we've just triggered a flow. And what I want to do after this flow is I want to get my data from the record that I've just created so that we can use that in our approval workflows to pass information between approvals and also to other systems. So I'm going to take my prospective suppliers table. And what we have here is we have some dynamic content. So as you start to build your flow, it recognizes what your previous steps was. And if there's any fields or information from a previous step, we can dynamically use that content in our next steps when we're creating further elements of an automation. So what I'm going to say here is we are going to use my table row ID. Okay, so let's just click on that. Okay, so we've selected our entity record now. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we are going to create an approval. Let's search for create an approval, and you can see here I've got some actions here. So let's create an approval. So firstly, what is this approval type? Well, this approval type is an approval reject, very simple approval reject, and it's the first person to respond. We will take their response. We can create groups of people and we say that, you know, everybody has to respond, but for today, we'll just keep it simple. So prospective supplier approval. And in this case, I'm just going to assign this to myself. So I'm just going to make sure that the approval comes through to myself. Okay. If we wanted to, we could actually go ahead and add a link to the item in our approval. So we will do that. And the way that I do that is I go back into my application. I actually can copy the link here for a record ID. So if I bring that into the item link, But what I'm saying is I dynamically want to update the record that I'm looking at based on where I have run my flow from. So let's just say we just want to take this particular record and we want that to be our item link. So whichever record we submit, it will provide the item link for that record in the approval. Okay, cool. So we've created an approval. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to take this a step further and we're going to use a concept called adaptive cards. So some of you may have seen adaptive cards or some of you may not, but essentially this is a pretty cool feature that you can post a feature within a Teams chat or within a Teams channel that will have a link to the record, and it will also have an approve or reject button directly within Teams. So the first one, create an approval, creates an email link. And now what we're doing is we're saying we're going to take that step further and we want to post the approval into Teams so that somebody can approve directly from Teams. Okay, so we're going to post as the Flowbot and we're going to post in a chat with our Flowbot. And who do we want to send this to? Again, I'm just going to use myself for today's purposes. And as you can see here, you can create custom adaptive cards. But what Microsoft have recognized is people were creating adaptive cards quite often for approvals. So they've just gone ahead and given you an out-of-the-box adaptive card. And we'll see what that means shortly when we run our approval flow. Okay, so we're going to do Teams adaptive card. And then what we're going to do is we're going to wait for an approval. So we're going to wait for an approval. So we're going to wait for somebody to respond, and the approval that we're waiting for is the approval ID that we created earlier. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to put a condition into our flow here. So we're going to say based on the approval response, let's just say outcome from our approval is equal to approved. So if the response comes back from the approval and the procurement manager or the finance manager has approved this record, then what we are going to do is we are going to automatically take the data from our Power Apps record and we are going to automatically create the relevant supplier record within finance and operations. So this is pretty cool that we have the ability to do this directly in Power Automate. So we're going to add an action here. And as you can see, if I type in create record, you can see there's a number of applications where I can go and create a record automatically. One of those being finance and operations. So based on the record in Power Apps being approved, we are automatically going to take that information and create the record in finance and operations. So I'm just going to select my instance here. So I've got an internal environment, and I know that my entity that I need to populate today, so my data entity where this data will sit, is my vendors v3 data entity. So what that's doing now, it's going ahead and it's bringing in all of the fields that are applicable within that finance and operations data entity. So you can see here, okay, so you can see here that we have vendors v3. We need to populate a supplier group, so I'm just going to hard code a supplier group. We're going to say which entity within our finance and operations instance that we want to populate this information in. Now this is the really cool part. So it's asking for a vendor account. Now what we're not going to do is hard code a vendor account or a supplier code, because we already have data in our Power application. So what we are going to do is we're going to take the information from our Power Apps record and map that across to finance and operations. So if I search for supplier, you'll see here I can say take the supplier code from my Power App record and automatically send that to the vendor account field within finance and operations. Okay, and I could go through and map all of the data from my Power App to the finance and operations record. Now, what I'm not going to do today is map all of those fields that we had. I'm just going to map a key number of fields. So just because this is a very large table, I'm just going to do a search here on name. So there's a supplier name field that I want to populate. Okay, so we have a supplier name here. And what we'll do, we'll use our dynamic content. Okay, so we'll search for supplier name. And we'll map the supplier name from our Power App record across to the supplier name field in D365 F&O. So really at this stage, we are just going to create the record. So that's fine. So I've just mapped some very high level information from my Power App to say at the point of the prospective supplier record being approved through Teams or through email, automatically take the information from my Power App and go and create a supplier record in D365 F&O. Now there's a whole load more I can do with this. I can automatically put the supplier on hold as we await more information in finance and operations. But for today's demonstration, I'm just going to keep this very simple. So we'll go ahead, we'll save that. And that has now been created as a Power Automate application, as a Power Automate flow. So if I look in my solution now, what you'll see is I did forget to rename it. I didn't actually give my solution a name, my Power App solution name, but what Power Automate did was give it a name based on what it thinks was in the Power Automate record. Okay, so just because of time constraints today, what I have done is I've got a demo solution here, which has got slightly more functionality within it. Okay, so this is hooked up. So it's taken exactly the same solution that we've created there. But what I've also done is I've added a business process flow. So that would have taken me another 5 to 10 minutes to probably create that business process flow. But otherwise, all of the setup that we have done today is exactly the same as what we're seeing in this demo solution here today. But I just want to show you how we can actually layer in a business process flow to support us through this process. So you can see here that the difference between our previous record and this record is we have this business process flow here to guide us through this. So if somebody was to create a new prospective supplier within the application, they would actually have a process flow at the top here, and it would say, you need to capture this information before you can move on to the next stage. So let's just go ahead and start creating some information. So let's say, webinar 01 record, and the supplier name is webinar test supplier. I'm not going to put an approval status in, but I will save the record there. So if we have a look at that solution, then you can see here that is guiding us through a process flow. Okay, so it takes you through, and you cannot go to the next stage until you have populated all of the information that is required as part of this business process flow. Okay, so I just wanted to show you there a demonstration of how a business process flow can enhance this supplier creation process. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll just go back to our solution and we will work with that application that we've designed today without the business process flow. So let's go ahead and let's play our current solution that we're working with today. And we're going to create ourselves a new record. So let's call this webinar 001 record. The supplier name is test supplier. And I could populate some address information in here if I wanted to, but I'm not going to do that for today. So we're just going to provide an email address. So I'm going to say test@gmail.com. And we're going to save this. Okay, so sorry, what I'm going to do, I am going to use my demonstration. I am going to use my demo solution for today. Sorry, I don't know why I flicked back to my previous solution there. We are going to use the demo solution for this today. Okay, so we will carry on working with the business process flow. So it says we need to capture an email address. So let's go ahead and capture an email address. That's at gmail.com. So we'll save that. And what it said is you've captured all of your procurement information. So you're now able to move on to your next stage. So let's move on to the next stage. It now says you need to capture some financial information. So we need to capture some payment terms. Now I can either do that directly from this process flow, or I can do it here within my application. So I'm just going to say the supplier is on a 90-day payment term. Save that. We now need to do some quality information. So this is capture certificates, anti-money laundering checks, and modern day slavery checks. So let's go to our due diligence tabs and we'll say they do have a food safety certificate, and that's just a free text box. Whereas you can see here, our money laundering checks and modern day slavery checks are pass or fail columns. So let's just say we've passed all of our relevant checks and we have populated all of our quality information in here. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to submit this for approval. Okay. The first time that I run this flow, it's just going to go ahead and it's saying, okay, you've run the flow. Can you just run the flow? Okay. So this now has been sent for approval. So in the background, what I should be getting now is a flow record. Yeah. Okay. So let me just show you this. So what's happened now is it's created an approval and it has sent me an adaptive card in a Teams chat. So you can see here, I have a chat with a flow bot in Teams and I have a link to my record and I can approve or reject the record from here. Okay, so I could go in and have a look at the link and see what data is in there. But because of time constraints today, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to approve this and we're going to submit the approval. So as the approver, I've had that come through via email in the background, but I've also had that come through in my Teams chat with the Flowbot. So it's given me an adaptive card and it said, can you please approve this prospective supplier? So what's happening now is it's running in the background and it's going through the Power Apps, the Power Automate flow that we created. And it's saying, go ahead and create that supplier in finance and operations. So we're just going to give that a moment to run, and we will then check to see if that information has been captured in finance and operations. I'm just going to duplicate my tab here. Go to make.powerapps.com just to see where our flow is. So we're going to go into our demo supplier onboarding solution. I'm going to look at my cloud flow here and I'm going to see the status of this cloud flow. Okay, so you can see here, this cloud flow has succeeded. So if I go into finance and operations now, and I go and have a look at my vendors list, so my suppliers list, what we should see here now is our test supplier. So if we load into our suppliers, and I come down here, we have a record here called webinar 01, which is based on my webinar test supplier. So what you'll see here is from our Power Apps solution, we submitted a supplier for approval. The supplier was approved. Okay, so the supplier was approved. On approval in Teams, the supplier record was automatically created in my finance and operations instance with the information brought across from our Power App. We automatically placed the supplier on hold, which I built into this solution as well. And what also happened is it came back into my Power App and it updated the approval status to approved. And all of that has happened with us clicking the approve button within Microsoft Teams to say we've vetted the supplier, we've approved it, we're happy for us to trade with the supplier. And from there, we have then automated the creation of the supplier record in finance and operations and gone back and updated our approval status within the Power App. Okay, so very, very powerful solution there. So that brings us to the end of our demonstration today. And what you'll see there is within the space of half an hour, we have managed to create a proof of concept. And at this stage, it is just a proof of concept rather than a final solution. But we have managed to create a proof of concept solution that has automated and digitalized our previous off-system process. And by using Power Platform, we've created a nice user interface, we've created an approval workflow, and we have created an automation into our finance and operations instance. So I just flick back to my presentation here. That just goes to our business scenario again. So we've covered all of the elements we wanted to cover there. And that brings us to the end of the presentation. So Claire, do we have any questions from the chat today based on what we've seen?
Hi, Amar. It's Pra. I don't see any other further questions.
Okay.
Yeah, Claire has addressed the other two.
Perfect.
Is
Okay.
there anybody in the audience with any other questions? If you want to quickly put that into the chat window. I don't see anything else, but I am going to post into the chat window.
Yeah.
For people to complete the form if they want to contact us with more information. I've just shared the link now.
Yeah, and I think this is quite a key point. So, obviously we've taken a demo business scenario case there, but what we're trying to show here is that essentially any off-system processes that have not been incorporated as part of your core ERP solution, and this could be within D365 or other ERP applications. So anything in your solution that has remained off-system or is very manual or requires a lot of manual input, we can, if you get in contact with us, we can start you on your Power Platform journey or help you with your Power, your existing Power Platform journey. And we can do an analysis of some off-system business processes and see how we can use the Power Platform to help digitalize and automate some of those off-system processes. So yeah, if you get in contact with us today, I think you're going to put a link in the chat for people to get into contact with us. But if you get in
just
contact
posted
with us,
that, and I'll post it again. Someone's asked, Naveen, do we get access to this recording? We will be posting this on our Mint website as an on-demand link. Right, and we'll be hosting our next webinar on the 6th of December. So look out for invites that will be coming through, and we'll also be posting it on our social channels.
Awesome. Okay. Have we had any more?
That's a wrap.
Yeah, that's a wrap. Okay. If there's no more questions, we'll cut the session there today. But as we said, get in contact with us if there's anything that you need or any further questions that you have. I'm sure we can clarify if there's further demonstrations that you would like for your business. Just get in contact with us and we can take it from there.
Thank you so much to our audience and have a great afternoon.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time. Take care. Bye.
Bye.